and welcome to this deep dive all about the Kuiper Belt.
Ooh, it's a region that's been capturing people's imaginations lately.
You're absolutely right about that, and our listener today is super curious about what lies beyond Neptune. So we've pulled together a ton of research, the latest scientific papers, all about the Kuiper Belt.
Excellent. I think they're in for some surprises. People tend to think of it as this cold, dark, empty zone, but recent discoveries are showing us just how dynamic and fascinating the Kuiper Belt truly is. It's teeming with icy objects, remnants from the earliest days of our solar system, and it holds clues to some of the biggest mysteries about how everything came to be.
Okay, so let's jump right in. For someone who's just starting to learn about this region, what's the Kuiper Belt in a nutshell?
Imagine a giant donut of icy objects stretching far beyond Neptune. It starts around 30 AU from the Sun, that's 30 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun, and extends out to about 50 AU.
Wow, that's a seriously huge donut. And it's full of these things called Kuiper Belt objects, or KBOs. I've heard that term thrown around, but what exactly are they?
KBOs are basically leftovers from the formation of our solar system, like cosmic crumbs that never quite got swept up. Think chunks of ice, rock, frozen gases, all sorts of primordial ingredients.
Like a primordial soup, but frozen?
Exactly. And they come in all sizes. Some are as small as pebbles, others are dwarf planets like Pluto. But the thing is, they're not all just randomly scattered out there.
Right, there's got to be some kind of order to the chaos.
Exactly. There are distinct types of KBOs, and each type tells us something different about the history of our solar system.
That's where it gets really interesting for me. What kinds of KBOs are out there, and what makes them unique?
The most common type, the ones that really define the main structure of the belt, are called classical KBOs. They have pretty circular orbits, almost like well-behaved commuters sticking to their lanes. Their orbits haven't been messed with much by the gravity of the big planets.
Okay, so they're playing it safe, sticking to the rules of the cosmic road.
Yeah, you could say that. Then you've got the resonant KBOs, which are a bit more rebellious. Their orbits are locked in a kind of gravitational dance with Neptune.
Ooh, a cosmic dance-off. Who's got the best moves?
Well, a famous example is Pluto. It's in a 3.2 resonance with Neptune. That means for every 3 orbits Neptune makes, Pluto completes 2.
So they're in sync but not perfectly matched, a bit like a dance partners who are still figuring out their steps together.
Exactly. And lastly, we have the scattered disk objects. These are the ones with the really wild, elongated, tilted orbits, like someone knocked over the cosmic pool table.
Talk about breaking the rules. What happened to them?
They were probably scattered outwards by close encounters with Neptune way back when the solar system was still forming.
So it's not just a random jumble of ice chunks. There's actually structure and order out there. And the variety of orbits tells a story. It's amazing to think how recent much of this knowledge is. We only started spotting objects beyond 50 AU in 1999. The first one was 1999 DG8.
Right. Makes you wonder what else is lurking out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah. Exactly. And that brings us to what these KBOs are actually made of. The bigger ones like Pluto, CHARON, Eris, Makemake, Haumea, those are the ones we have the most data on.
Right, because they're easier to see and study.
So what have we learned about their composition? I've heard they're mostly ice, but is it all just frozen water?
Water ice is definitely the main ingredient, but there's a twist. We see both crystalline ice, which is like the ice cubes in your freezer, and amorphous ice, which is more like what you get when a puddle freezes super quickly.
Oh, I see. Like the difference between a carefully crafted ice sculpture and a frozen slushy.
Perfect analogy. Finding both types on KBOs is fascinating because it tells us about how they formed, what the conditions were like back then. And it's not just water ice. There are other frozen gases mixed in, like nitrogen, methane, carbon monoxide, all giving off their own telltale signals.
So it's like a giant cosmic ice cream sundae with all sorts of different flavors swirled together. But it seems like there's always something new being discovered out there. What are some of the most recent findings that have surprised scientists?
Just this year, in 2024, the James Webb Space Telescope detected carbon dioxide and hydrogen peroxide on CHARON Pluto's moon.
Wait, carbon dioxide and hydrogen peroxide on CHARON? What are those doing out there?
That's what everyone wants to know. Scientists think these compounds might have formed from the breakdown of water ice by radiation, or maybe they came from interactions with carbon-rich leftovers from ancient impacts. It's a puzzle we're still piecing together.
You know, the Kuiper Belt is sounding less like a frozen wasteland and more like a giant chemistry lab out there. And speaking of interesting ingredients, I read that ammonia, or ammonia hydrates, play a key role in the Kuiper Belt. Why are those so important?
Think of ammonia as antifreeze for water ice. It lowers the melting point. That means even in the extreme cold of the Kuiper Belt, water ice could become mobile enough to flow. And that brings us to a really exciting possibility. Cryovolcanism.
Cryovolcanism, so like volcanoes, but erupting ice instead of lava.
Exactly.
That's incredible. I always pictured the Kuiper Belt as this completely frozen, inactive place.
That was the assumption for a long time. But then New Horizons gave us a close-up look at Pluto in 2015, and those images completely changed our understanding.
Okay, I'm hooked. What did New Horizons reveal about Pluto?
Well, first of all, Pluto has surprisingly young surfaces, and there are clear signs of geological activity. Even today, it's not just a dead, icy world. New Horizons found a vast heart-shaped nitrogen glacier called Sputnik Planitia. It saw mountains and even possible cryovolcanoes. Right, Mons and Picard Mons are the prime suspects.
So Pluto's got a heart of ice, literally. But those cryovolcanoes, what's fueling them?
This was a huge surprise because Pluto is so small and so far from the sun. The fact that it's geologically active is mind-boggling.
Wow, Pluto is way more lively than anyone expected. It makes you wonder what secrets other large KBOs might be hiding. Eris, for instance, is even bigger than Pluto. Could it be even more active?
That's definitely a possibility. We also see these intriguing mottled plains on Pluto, possibly uncovered by a large scarp, which further suggests active geological processes.
Okay, now I'm picturing Eris with even more dramatic features. Maybe giant ice canyons or towering cryovolcanoes spewing nitrogen into space.
It's an exciting thought, but all this activity raises a question: what's powering it?
Yeah, where's all this energy coming from in such a cold and distant place? What are the possible heat sources for geological activity in the Kuiper Belt?
There are a few candidates. Radioactive decay in Pluto's core could be generating some heat. Then there's the possibility of tidal heating that's caused by gravitational interactions with CHARON, although it's still debated whether that's a significant factor for Pluto. And there's also the idea of latent heat being released as a subsurface ocean freezes.
So many possibilities. It's like a cosmic detective story trying to figure out what makes Pluto tick. And speaking of mysteries, this brings us to another big one. The total mass of the Kuiper Belt. How much material is actually out there in that giant donut?
That's a tough one to answer with any precision. Most KBOs are so faint and distant, it's incredibly difficult to estimate the total mass. Scientists have to rely on clever techniques, kind of like trying to weigh an elephant by looking at its footprints.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do you weigh a cosmic elephant?
They study the size distribution of the larger KBOs that we can see and use that data to extrapolate.
Yep.
But of course, there are a lot of uncertainties involved.
Oh, it's like a giant cosmic guessing game. What are some of the estimates that researchers have come up with?
Current research suggests the Kuiper Belt's total mass could be anywhere from about 0.01 to 0.3 Earth masses. That's quite a wide range, highlighting just how much we still don't know. A lot of the uncertainty comes down to the rollover point in the size distribution. At what size do we start to see a drop-off in the number of objects? Figuring that out would tell us how much mass is tied up in the smaller, fainter KBOs that we can't easily detect.
That makes sense. The unseen KBOs could really tip the scales, so to speak. So we've got this massive belt of icy leftovers, different types, some geologically active, with a mass that's still a bit of a mystery. But how did this all come to be in the first place? What's the story of the Kuiper Belt's formation and evolution?
Well, to understand the Kuiper Belt, you have to go back to the very beginning, about 4.6 billion years ago, to the birth of our solar system.
Back when the Earth was just a twinkle in the cosmos's eye.
Exactly. Back then, there was this giant cloud of gas and dust called the solar nebula. It started to collapse under its own gravity.
So picture a swirling vortex of cosmic dust bunnies. What happened next?
As this cloud collapsed, it spun faster and faster, flattening out into a disk. In the center, where most of the mass collected, the sun began to form. But further out, where things were much colder, ices and dust grains started clumping together.
So the inner part of the disk was like a cosmic oven, while the outer part was more like a cosmic freezer.
Perfect analogy. And in that cosmic freezer, beyond where Neptune would eventually form, that's where the Kuiper Belt began to take shape. Over millions of years, these icy particles kept bumping into each other, sticking together, and gradually growing larger.
So it's like a giant game of cosmic snowball fights. But these snowballs weren't exactly fluffy, were they? What were these early Kuiper Belt objects made of?
They were a mix of ices, mostly water ice, but also methane, ammonia, carbon monoxide, along with rocky materials and dust. This recipe reflects the ingredients available in the outer solar nebula, where it was cold enough for these materials to freeze solid.
So like a cosmic recipe book with different ingredients depending on the location in the solar nebula. But as these objects grew larger, did they undergo any changes? Did they differentiate like the planets did, with heavier materials sinking to the core and lighter materials forming an outer layer?
That's a great question, and it's one that scientists are still trying to answer definitively. The level of differentiation in KBOs likely depends on their size and their thermal history. Larger KBOs, like Pluto, are more likely to have differentiated, forming a rocky core, an icy mantle, and possibly even a subsurface ocean.
A subsurface ocean on Pluto? Now, that's a tantalizing thought. But what about smaller KBOs? Are they just frozen, undifferentiated clumps of ice and rock?
It's probable that many smaller KBOs have remained relatively undifferentiated. However, even these objects can experience internal heating from radioactive decay, which could lead to some level of melting and separation of materials. Remember, even small amounts of internal heating can significantly impact a KBO's surface, driving cryovolcanism or altering its icy structure.
So even in the coldest reaches of the solar system, there's the potential for dynamic processes and surprising discoveries. But let's get back to the formation of the Kuiper belt itself. Was it just a smooth and gradual process of accretion, or were there any major events that disrupted its evolution?
The early Kuiper belt probably went through a period of intense bombardment, as the remaining planetesimals in the solar system collided with each other and the growing KBOs. This bombardment would have left its mark on the surfaces of KBOs, creating craters, fractures, and even contributing to the mixing of materials.
So, like a cosmic demolition derby. But wasn't there also a period of planetary migration that affected the Kuiper belt? We talked about the NICE model earlier.
You're right, the NICE model proposes that the giant planets, especially Neptune, migrated outwards early in the solar system's history. This migration would have had a profound effect on the Kuiper belt, scattering objects into new orbits, creating resonant populations, and even potentially triggering the late heavy bombardment.
So it wasn't just a peaceful, isolated region where icy objects were quietly forming. It was a place of dramatic change, shaped by both internal processes and external forces. And that interplay of factors has resulted in the diverse and fascinating Kuiper belt we see today.
Precisely. And as we continue to explore this distant realm, we're gaining a deeper appreciation for the complexity and dynamism of the outer solar system.
It's like peeling back the layers of a cosmic onion, revealing new mysteries and insights with each discovery. But let's shift our focus to another intriguing aspect of the Kuiper belt: its mass. We've mentioned earlier that estimating the total mass of the Kuiper belt is a challenge. Why is that so difficult, and what are some of the approaches scientists are using to tackle this problem?
The difficulty in estimating the Kuiper belt's mass stems from a few key factors. First, most KBOs are incredibly faint. They're so far away from the sun that they reflect very little light, making them extremely difficult to detect and observe.
It's like trying to spot a cosmic firefly in a vast, dark field.
Exactly. And second, the vast majority of KBOs are likely small, perhaps only a few kilometers or even meters in diameter. These smaller objects are even fainter and more difficult to detect than their larger counterparts.
So it's not just a matter of counting the objects we can see. There's a whole hidden population of KBOs that we're not even aware of.
That's right. And this hidden population could contribute significantly to the total mass of the Kuiper belt. To account for this, scientists have developed various techniques to estimate the mass.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of cosmic mass estimation.
Right.
What are some of these techniques?
One approach is to study the size distribution of KBOs. By observing the number of objects of different sizes, we can extrapolate to estimate the number of smaller, unseen objects, and from there, we can calculate an approximate mass.
So a bit like estimating the weight of a bag of marbles by counting the number of different sized marbles you can see.
Exactly. And another approach is to study the gravitational influence of the Kuiper belt on the orbits of other objects, like planets or spacecraft. By measuring these subtle gravitational perturbations, we can infer the mass of the Kuiper belt as a whole.
It's like weighing an invisible elephant by observing how it affects the ground beneath its feet. But are there any limitations to these techniques?
Of course. The size distribution method relies on assumptions about the relationship between size and mass, which might not be accurate for all KBOs. And the gravitational perturbation method is sensitive to the distribution of mass within the Kuiper belt, which we don't fully understand.
So it's a bit of a cosmic puzzle, with pieces of information scattered across vast distances and obscured by the limitations of our observational techniques. But despite these challenges, have scientists been able to come up with any estimates for the mass of the Kuiper belt?
Yes, though there's still considerable uncertainty. Current estimates suggest the Kuiper belt has a mass somewhere between 0.01 and zero point 0.3 Earth masses. That's a pretty wide range, but it gives us a sense of the scale of this vast reservoir of icy objects.
So even with the best tools and techniques, we're still left with a bit of cosmic mystery. But isn't there another way to think about the Kuiper belt's mass, not just in terms of its total weight, but also in terms of its distribution? How does the mass of the Kuiper belt vary with distance from the sun?
That's an excellent point. The distribution of mass within the Kuiper belt is not uniform. It's thought to be more concentrated in certain regions, like the main belt, where classical KBOs dominate. And it likely tapers off as you move further out into the scattered disk and beyond.
So it's not like a solid ring of icy material. It's more like a clumpy and uneven distribution, shaped by the gravitational influence of the giant planets and the history of collisions and scattering events. But how do scientists study this mass distribution when most KBOs are so faint and difficult to detect?
It's a challenge. But by combining observations of KDOs of different sizes and orbital characteristics, and by using computer models to simulate the evolution of the Kuiper belt, we can start to piece together a picture of how its mass is distributed.
So it's a bit like trying to map a hidden forest by observing the distribution of trees of different sizes and species, and by studying the patterns of sunlight and shadow that filter through the canopy.
That's a great analogy. And as our observational capabilities improve, and as we gather more data on KBOs, we'll be able to refine our understanding of the Kuiper belt's mass distribution and its implications for the history and evolution of the outer solar system.
It's amazing to think that we're only just beginning to unravel the secrets of this vast and mysterious region. But let's zoom in on a particular aspect of KBO surfaces that has captured the imagination of scientists and the public alike: the possibility of cryovolcanism. We touched on this earlier, but let's delve a bit deeper into what cryovolcanism is, how it might work, and what evidence we have for its presence on KBOs.
Cryovolcanism is essentially volcanism, but instead of molten rock, it involves the eruption of icy materials like water, ammonia, methane, or nitrogen. It's a fascinating phenomenon that challenges our traditional notions of what a volcano can be.
Volcanoes spewing ice instead of fire. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. But how does this process actually work on a cold, icy body like a KBO?
The key to cryovolcanism is internal heating. Even though KBOs are extremely cold on their surfaces, they can still have some internal heat, generated by radioactive decay in their cores or by tidal forces from interactions with other bodies. This internal heat can melt or partially melt the icy materials beneath the surface, creating a kind of cryomagma.
Cryomagma. It sounds like something you'd order at a futuristic ice cream parlor. But how does this cryomagma make its way to the surface and erupt?
It's similar to the processes that drive volcanic eruptions on Earth, but with some key differences. On KBOs, the lower gravity and the different properties of icy materials can lead to unique eruption styles and landforms.
So we might see icy geysers, flowing glaciers, or even dome-shaped features formed by the slow extrusion of cryomagma.
Exactly. And we have tantalizing evidence for all of these features on KBOs. On Pluto, for example, New Horizons observed vast plains of nitrogen ice, possibly formed by cryovolcanic flows, as well as mountains with depressions at their summits that could be remnants of cryovolcanic vents.
It's incredible to think that a world as small and distant as Pluto could be geologically active. But what about other KBOs? Do we have any evidence for cryovolcanism on other objects?
We see hints of cryovolcanism on other KBOs too. Eris, for instance, might have ammonia hydrates on its surface, and that points to water ice having melted at some point.
So like a cosmic smoking gun. But if cryovolcanism is happening on KBOs, what are the implications? What does it tell us about these objects and their potential for harboring life?
Cryovolcanism is exciting for a few reasons. First, it reveals that KBOs are not just static, frozen worlds, they're dynamic and active, with internal processes that can shape their surfaces and potentially even their atmospheres.
So they're more like Earth than we might have imagined, at least in terms of having active geology.
And second, cryovolcanism could transport materials from the interior of a KBO to its surface, including water, organic molecules, and even potential energy sources. These are some of the key ingredients that are thought to be necessary for life as we know it.
So, cryovolcanism could be a way to deliver the building blocks of life to the surface of a KBO. That's a mind-blowing thought.
It certainly is, and while we haven't yet found definitive evidence for life on any KBO, the possibility is intriguing, and it motivates us to continue exploring these distant worlds and unraveling their secrets.
It's like a cosmic treasure hunt, searching for clues about the origins of life itself in the coldest reaches of our solar system. But let's turn our attention to another fascinating aspect of KBOs, their colors. We've mentioned the reddish hue of Pluto's Cthulhu Regio and CHARON's Ozterra, but what about other KBOs? What range of colors do they exhibit, and what do these colors tell us about their composition and history?
KBOs display a remarkable diversity of colors, from reddish hues to neutral grays and even hints of bluish tints. These colors are like cosmic brushstrokes, painting a picture of the varied compositions and processes that have shaped these objects.
It's like a cosmic art gallery. But what are the primary factors that determine the color of a KBO?
The color of a KBO is primarily determined by the composition of its surface materials and how those materials interact with sunlight. Water ice, for example, tends to reflect sunlight more evenly across different wavelengths, giving it a neutral gray appearance.
So like a blank canvas, what about other materials?
Other materials can absorb certain wavelengths of light more strongly than others, leading to more distinctive colors. Reddish hues, as we've discussed, are often associated with tholins, those complex organic molecules that form when simple organic compounds are exposed to radiation.
Those cosmic spray tans are back. But what about other colors? What causes the bluish tints that have been observed on some KBOs?
Bluish tints can be caused by a variety of factors, including the presence of certain ices like nitrogen or methane, or the scattering of light by small particles on the surface. For example, the dwarf planet Makemake has a slightly bluish tint, which is thought to be due to the presence of methane ice on its surface.
So Makemake is like a cosmic blueberry. But the colors of KBOs aren't just static, are they? Can they change over time?
Absolutely. The colors of KBOs can change over time due to a variety of factors, including impacts, space weathering, and even internal processes like cryovolcanism.
So it's not just a matter of what they're made of, it's also a matter of what's happened to them over billions of years. But what can we learn from studying the colors of KBOs? How can they help us understand the history and evolution of the outer solar system?
The colors of KBOs can provide valuable clues about their composition, their surface processes, and even their origins. For example, the distribution of different colored KBOs within the Kuiper belt can tell us about the dynamics of the early solar system and how objects have been scattered and mixed over time.
So like a cosmic game of color-coded tag, but as we gather more data on KBO colors, are there any particular patterns or trends that have emerged?
One interesting trend is that KBOs in the classical belt, which are thought to be some of the most pristine remnants of the early solar system, tend to have a wider range of colors than objects in other parts of the Kuiper belt.
So the classical KBOs are the true cosmic artists, expressing themselves in a full spectrum of colors. But what does this tell us about their history?
It suggests that the classical belt has experienced less mixing and homogenization than other parts of the Kuiper belt, preserving a greater diversity of compositions and colors.
It's like a cosmic time capsule, preserving a snapshot of the early solar system's colorful chaos. But as we continue to explore the Kuiper belt, are there any particular colors or color combinations that scientists are particularly interested in finding?
One color that always piques the interest of scientists is green. Green hues on KBOs could indicate the presence of certain minerals or organic molecules that are of particular interest in the search for life's building blocks.
So a cosmic search for the green planet, or at least the green KBO. But have we found any green KBOs yet?
Not yet, but the search continues. And with new telescopes and observational techniques coming online, who knows what colorful surprises the Kuiper belt might hold.
It's a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest reaches of our solar system, there's still a vibrant tapestry of colors waiting to be discovered and deciphered.
And with each new discovery, we're adding another brushstroke to the cosmic canvas, revealing a more complete and captivating picture of our solar system's origins and its potential for harboring life.
It's a journey of exploration that's full of wonder and endless possibilities. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the size distribution of KBOs. We've mentioned that there are millions, possibly even trillions of these objects, ranging in size from tiny pebbles to dwarf planets like Pluto. But how do scientists study this size distribution, and what have they learned about the relative abundance of objects of different sizes?
Studying the size distribution of KBOs is crucial for understanding the history and evolution of the Kuiper belt. It can tell us about the processes of accretion and collision that have shaped the belt, and it can help us estimate its total mass.
Okay, so size matters in the Kuiper belt, but how do scientists actually measure the sizes of these distant and faint objects?
It's a challenging task. One approach is to use telescopes to directly image KBOs and measure their apparent brightness. By combining this information with estimates of their distance and reflectivity, we can calculate their approximate diameters.
So, a bit like judging the size of a distant ship by its lights. But aren't there limitations to this direct imaging method?
Yes, direct imaging is only effective for larger KBOs, those that are bright enough to be detected and resolved by telescopes. For smaller KBOs, we need to rely on other techniques.
Okay, what are some of these other techniques?
One powerful technique is called stellar occultation. This involves observing a KDO as it passes in front of a distant star. By measuring the duration of the star's dimming, we can infer the size of the KBO.
So like a cosmic eclipse, but with a KBO casting the shadow instead of the moon.
Precisely. And another technique is called thermal modeling. This involves measuring the amount of heat emitted by a KBO and using this information to estimate its size.
So like a cosmic thermometer, but instead of measuring temperature, we're measuring size.
Exactly. By combining these different techniques, scientists have been able to piece together a picture of the Kuiper Belt's size distribution.
Okay, so what have they learned? What's the breakdown of KBOs by size? Are there more small objects than large ones?
The size distribution of KBOs follows a power law, meaning that there are many more small objects than large ones. This is consistent with what we see in other populations of small bodies in the solar system, like asteroids.
So the Kuiper Belt is like a cosmic rock tumbler, smoothing out the rough edges and creating a finer and finer grain of cosmic dust over billions of years. But amidst all these small objects, there are also some standouts. The dwarf planets like Pluto, Eris, Makemake, and Haumea. What makes these objects special, and how did they manage to grow so large in a sea of smaller bodies?
The dwarf planets are the giants of the Kuiper Belt, and their formation is a testament to the power of gravity and the long timescales involved in planetary evolution. These objects likely formed through a process called runaway accretion, where the largest objects in a region gravitationally attract and sweep up smaller objects, growing larger and larger over time.
So like cosmic vacuum cleaners, sucking up all the little bits and pieces.
Exactly. And as these objects grew larger, their gravity became stronger, allowing them to attract even more material and grow even faster. This process eventually led to the formation of the dwarf planets we see today.
It's amazing to think that these objects started out as tiny particles in the solar nebula and gradually evolved into worlds of their own. But even though the dwarf planets are the largest members of the Kuiper Belt, they're still dwarfed by the giant planets of the inner solar system. What are some of the key differences between dwarf planets and giant planets? And what insights can we gain from comparing these two types of worlds?
One of the key differences between dwarf planets and giant planets is their mass. Giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn are massive enough to have cleared their orbital neighborhoods of other large objects. Dwarf planets, on the other hand, share their orbits with other objects of comparable size.
So giant planets are like cosmic bullies, pushing around the little guys, while dwarf planets are more like team players, sharing their space.
That's a fun way to think about it. And this difference in mass also leads to differences in their composition and structure. Giant planets are primarily composed of gas, mostly hydrogen and helium, while dwarf planets are mostly composed of rock and ice.
So giant planets are like fluffy gas giants, while dwarf planets are more like dense, icy worlds.
Exactly. And because of their lower mass, dwarf planets have weaker gravity, which means they're less able to hold on to atmospheres. This is why Pluto, for example, has a very thin atmosphere that freezes and collapses onto its surface when it's farthest from the sun.
So dwarf planets are like cosmic ice cream cones, with a thin layer of frosting that melts and refreezes depending on the season.
That's a delightful analogy. But despite these differences, both dwarf planets and giant planets offer valuable insights into the processes of planetary formation and evolution.
It's like having two different perspectives on the same cosmic story, each revealing unique aspects of the grand narrative of our solar system's origins.
And by studying both types of worlds, we're gaining a deeper understanding of the diversity of planets that exist in our universe and the processes that have shaped our own corner of the cosmos.
It's a journey of discovery that's full of surprises, challenges, and profound insights. But as we continue to explore the Kuiper Belt and beyond, we're reminded that our solar system is a vast and complex place, with secrets yet to be revealed and stories yet to be told.
And with each new discovery, we're adding another chapter to that story, expanding our understanding of the universe and our place within it.
It's a journey that's full of wonder and endless possibilities. You know, with all this talk about icy worlds and organic molecules, it's hard not to think about one of the biggest questions out there, the potential for life beyond Earth. While we haven't found definitive proof yet, the search is ongoing, and the Kuiper Belt is emerging as a surprisingly interesting place to look. Why is that? What makes this cold, dark, distant region a potential haven for life?
You'd be surprised. The Kuiper Belt might seem inhospitable at first glance, but it actually has a number of key ingredients thought to be essential for life as we know it. First and foremost, there's water. KBOs are primarily made of water ice, and that water ice could provide a solvent for biochemical reactions.
So it's like a cosmic reservoir of liquid potential. But water alone isn't enough for life to emerge, is it? What else is needed?
You're right. Water is just the starting point. Life also needs organic molecules, the building blocks of cells and biological processes. And we have evidence that organic molecules are present in the Kuiper Belt. Those thalmins we discussed earlier. Those are complex organic molecules that form when simpler organic compounds are exposed to radiation.
So those cosmic spritans are back, and this time they're carrying the potential ingredients for life. But what about energy? Doesn't life need an energy source to power its metabolism?
Absolutely. And even though the Kuiper Belt is far from the sun, there are still potential energy sources available. Radioactive decay in the cores of KBOs could provide some internal heat. And some KBOs might experience tidal heating from gravitational interactions with moons or other objects.
So a bit of internal friction to keep things warm, but those energy sources still seem pretty weak compared to the sun. Is there any chance that sunlight could play a role in supporting life in the Kuiper Belt?
It's unlikely that sunlight alone could support life on the surface of a KBO. But it's possible that sunlight could play a role in driving chemical reactions that produce organic molecules or contribute to the energy balance of a subsurface ocean.
Okay, so maybe no sunbathing on Pluto, but perhaps there's a chance for life beneath the ice. You know, you mentioned those tholins as a source of organic molecules. Are there other types of organic molecules that have been found in the Kuiper Belt?
There are. Scientists have also found evidence of simpler organic molecules like methane and ethane, and even hints of more complex molecules like amino acids, the building blocks of proteins.
Hold on, amino acids in the Kuiper Belt? That's incredible. How did they end up all the way out there?
There are a couple of possibilities. They could have formed in the solar nebula itself, along with all the other materials that eventually coalesced to form the KBOs. Or they could have been delivered to the Kuiper Belt by comets or asteroids that originated in other parts of the solar system.
So a bit of cosmic cross-contamination. Doesn't the presence of amino acids increase the chances of finding life in the Kuiper Belt?
It's definitely an intriguing clue. Having the building blocks present certainly adds to the possibility. But it's important to remember that organic molecules, even amino acids, don't automatically equal life. They are just one piece of a much larger, very complex puzzle.
Right, it's like having all the ingredients for a cake, but not necessarily a recipe or an oven to bake it in. But let's say, hypothetically, that life does exist in the Kuiper Belt. What might it look like? Would it be similar to life on Earth, or would it be something completely different?
That question really gets the imagination going. It's possible that life in the Kuiper Belt could be based on the same fundamental chemistry as life on Earth, using water as a solvent and organic molecules as building blocks. But it's also possible that life in the Kuiper Belt could have evolved along entirely different pathways, utilizing different solvents, different energy sources, even different genetic material.
So we could be talking about life as we don't know it. What are some of the possibilities?
Some scientists have theorized about life forms that could exist in hydrocarbon lakes and seas, like those that might be found on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Titan is thought to have a similar composition to some KBOs.
Hydrocarbon lakes, like swimming in gasoline. That's not exactly a place I'd want to visit.
It wouldn't be very hospitable for us, that's for sure. But for life that evolved to thrive in those conditions, it could be perfectly normal. Another possibility is that in the frigid, dark depths of a subsurface ocean on a KBO, there could be life forms that rely on chemosynthesis, deriving energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight, similar to the life that exists around hydrothermal vents on Earth's ocean floor.
A whole ecosystem of extremophiles thriving in conditions that would be lethal to humans. The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling. But how would we even go about searching for life in such extreme environments? What are some of the challenges and strategies involved in detecting life beyond Earth?
Searching for life beyond Earth, especially in a place like the Kuiper Belt, is a monumental challenge. It requires us to push the boundaries of our knowledge, technology, and imagination.
Let's talk about those challenges. What are the biggest hurdles facing scientists who are looking for life in the Kuiper Belt?
Well, the most obvious challenge is the sheer distance. The Kuiper Belt is incredibly far away, making it difficult and expensive to send spacecraft there. And even if we do manage to send a probe, it would take years, if not decades, to reach its destination.
So patience is definitely a virtue for Kuiper Belt explorers, but what about the conditions on these KBOs themselves? Wouldn't the extreme cold and darkness make it difficult to find signs of life even if we could get there?
Absolutely. Life as we know it requires liquid water, and on the surface of most KBOs, water is frozen solid. This means that if life does exist in the Kuiper Belt, it's likely to be hidden beneath the ice, in subsurface oceans or aquifers.
So it's like a cosmic game of hide and seek, but with incredibly high stakes. But if life is hidden beneath the ice, how can we even detect it from Earth, or even with a spacecraft that's orbiting a KBO?
There are a few strategies we can employ. One approach is to look for chemical signatures of life in the plumes of material that might erupt from cryovolcanoes or geysers. These plumes could contain traces of organic molecules, gases, or even microorganisms that could hint at the presence of life below the surface.
It's like trying to sniff out the exhaust fumes of a cosmic microbe factory. But wouldn't those plumes be incredibly faint and difficult to detect from such vast distances?
You're absolutely right, it would be incredibly difficult. But with advanced telescopes and sensitive instruments, it's becoming increasingly possible to analyze the light from these plumes and identify the fingerprints of specific molecules. And another strategy is to search for indirect signs of life, like changes in the composition of a KBO's atmosphere or surface that could be caused by biological processes.
It's like playing cosmic detective, looking for those subtle clues that might point to the presence of a hidden culprit. It seems like even with the best technology available, detecting life in the Kuiper Belt would be a monumental achievement.
It would be. It would be a truly historic discovery. If we find even microbial life out there, it would transform our understanding of the universe and our place within it. It would demonstrate that life is not a fluke, a rare and fragile phenomenon confined to Earth, but perhaps something much more common and even more resilient than we ever imagined in the vastness of the cosmos.
It would blow the doors wide open to a whole new realm of possibilities. But even if we don't find life in the Kuiper Belt, the search itself is incredibly valuable. It's a testament to the power of human curiosity and our relentless pursuit of knowledge.
I agree. It's a journey that's driven by some of the most fundamental questions that have captivated humans for centuries. Are we alone? What is our place in the universe? And what is the nature of life itself?
These are questions that never cease to amaze and inspire, and it seems like the Kuiper Belt, with all its icy mysteries and hints of potential habitability, is one of the most exciting frontiers in this ongoing quest.
It's certainly a region that has captured our imaginations, sparking wonder and curiosity. And I think it holds the promise of revealing profound insights into the nature of our solar system, the origins of life, and perhaps even the possibility of life beyond Earth.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the Kuiper Belt with you today. We've gone from the basic building blocks of KBOs to their diverse compositions, dynamic processes, and even the tantalizing possibility of finding life in this distant and frigid region.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I have to say I'm really excited about what the future holds. With new telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope and upcoming space missions on the horizon, the next chapter in Kuiper Belt exploration is about to begin. And I have no doubt it will be filled with even more groundbreaking discoveries and mind-blowing revelations.
I'm on the edge of my seat, ready to see what we uncover. To our listeners, thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Kuiper Belt. And remember, keep looking up, keep asking those big cosmic questions, and never lose that sense of wonder and curiosity that drives us to explore the universe and our place within it.
Beautifully said. And until next time, keep exploring.
And as always, keep those cosmic questions coming.